March the 25th, 2020. Guys, you're looking at a video I did about 4 months ago, and it's called the 16 Chariots of Fire / the Flying Shields. And it was an encounter that I had, I think it was in spring of 2013, when I was in the Phoenix area. And this was just south of Phoenix, directly south of the Luke Air Force Base, just before you get to the Estrella Mountains. And to the left of that would have been Phoenix International Speedway once you crossed over the Gila River. Many of you know where it's at. Anyway, I will link to the video, but it's called 16 Chariots of Fire, the Flying Shields. But I'm not going to go there and describe that now because you can do that. It's an 18-minute and 34-second video, as you can see. But it is as detailed as I could get, and I think for those that know me, you'll know that I'm telling the truth about my encounter there. But this is very important because I think we're getting closer and closer to the time to where many are looking for the return of Christ, you know, just as kind of all hell breaks loose on this planet and things like that, and the Antichrist comes, and then there's going to be a return. And, you know, you've read in the Bible that it says men's hearts will fail them when this happens. Why is that? It's because it's going to be something they haven't expected, and it's because it's not really taught that much in churches nowadays. Mostly, especially the big churches, you're too busy doing events to really get into the Word of God. But again, I will link to this video, and it's important because we're going to start seeing these events increase as this event comes upon us. Now, if you go to Matthew 24, verse 29, it's about the coming of the Son of Man. Now, this story is repeated 3 times in the New Testament. It's in Matthew 13, Luke 21, and here at Matthew 24, same story, okay? And it's really kind of, it's on the Mount of Olives when a couple of the disciples ask him, Lord, what will be the signs of the return of the end of times? And there he explains that it wasn't a large group at this time, but listen to what I'm saying. This is King James. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. Very important. And the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Guys, by the time I'm through with this video, I'm not going to try to keep it any longer than it has to be, but it's going to take a minute. By the time I'm through with it, you're going to understand that entire sentence. I'm going to repeat it. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Now, stop right there. Let's put a comma there for a moment. When is Christ returning? It's going to be after the tribulation of those days. And there's a gap there. The end of the tribulation of man, Christ returns. What many would call the rapture is the gathering back. And whatever event on this earth occurs that changes you into your spiritual body, and that can be many forms, whether it's an earthquake or whatever. But at that moment, when you're changed, that is the return. But it's going to be after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. Notice the letters are in red. But if you go to, again, Luke 21 or Mark 13, it's going to tell you the same thing. So there's a tribulation of man that we have all been part of creating. But then the angels are gathered, and they're going to start doing their thing, and then comes after that, when God's people are removed, then will come the wrath of God. But what would cause the sun to be darkened and the moon not give her light? And stars, remember, who are the stars, shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. What are the powers of the heavens? Who has power in heaven? It's God. And when he grants the power to Christ and his angels, and you see that coming, you will see that power. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming where? In the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. When you think about an army coming in its power and great glory, it's huge. It's huge. It's 20,000. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Think about that. That is, the word rapture is not actually in the Bible, and many people have a very different concept of what it is. It's actually an event happens, and you're changed into your spiritual body, and you're gathered back. So, is there any other places in the Bible that talk about this besides the other two chapters I talked about, Luke and Mark? Yes, there is. There's many, and so it's time to understand this. Again, if you'll read, or go and look at the video that I mentioned at the beginning of this, you'll understand more. But right now, I'm going to show you in the Bible several more cases of this very event. Now, guys, in 2 Kings, you remember the story of Elijah and Elisha, kind of his protege. But 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11, it's talking about the spinning chariots of fire that take Elijah. And it came to pass, as they still went on and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elijah saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes, and rent them in two pieces. Again, as they were walking and they were talking, suddenly this bright flying vehicle and a cavalry of bright flying objects appear. And that word, horse, is a word translated which means rapid movement or flight. The cavalry of glowing vehicles was the army spoken of by the host. That's what we're dealing with. Another instance. And one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament is this chapter 6, verse 17. The horses and chariots of fire. It says, and Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes and he may see. And what has happened is the armies are looking for the prophet of Israel, because the Lord keeps telling Elijah where the ambushes of the enemy will be set up, if you understand this section of the Bible. And it baffles the enemy king, and he brings in his wise men and so-called prophets, and he says, how do they keep escaping me? How do they keep knowing where we're trying to trap Elijah or trap the enemy? And the prophets tell him, he said, Israel has a prophet, Elijah, and he is telling them everything we do. So the king sent all of his men, all of his earthly chariots, and surrounded Elijah and his young friend that he was teaching, who was scared to death on that mountain. His knees were shaking. As they woke, they heard a noise. They were staying in this place. They went outside, and they were surrounded by the entire army of the other king. And again, Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elijah. And when they came down to him, Elijah prayed unto the Lord and said, smite these people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elijah. Think about that. These are chariots of fire. And what had happened? The young man that was with Elijah, again, who had picked up that mantle, was terrified. And so Elijah prayed for spiritual eyes to be open, that veil to be parted, so that he could see what was really going on and who was really in control. And imagine that. You're surrounded by the chariots of your enemy. But behind them, that you can't see in your physical eyes, are the angels of God that drive these chariots of fire. And that was the point of this. He is there, he's in control, and he's watching everyone's response. Now again, one of them comes to the ground. One of these objects land, and that's when Elijah asked God, Yahweh, to cause the blindness. Not all of them. They were there. They were in formation. Watch the video that I told you about. But, and that's what happened. Then, guys, if you go to Psalms 68:17, and think about what I'm saying, it says the chariots of God again are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai in the holy place. Now think about what would black out the sun and the moon. Maybe 20,000 of these objects. And do you think our government would want us to see that? As many people talk about meteor storms and meteor showers, and those things are going to happen on this planet. But I think this is something totally different. A meteor storm will not black out the sky for that many days. Anyway, it says, Thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive, thou hast received gifts for man, yeah, for the rebellious also, that the Lord God might dwell among them. 20,000 blacking out the sky. You do not want to be in the group of that their hearts fail them when this happens. In Jeremiah 66:5 it says, For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. Guys, we're not talking about these chariots remaining in that the spiritual eye, or the vision of the spiritual eye that was limited in the time of Elijah. Everyone will see this coming, because they're going to part the veil and appear here. Again, the Lord will come with fire with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. People can't say this is historic, that it's in the past. It hasn't happened. It says, Behold, he shall come up as clouds, and his chariot shall be as a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe unto us, for we are spoiled. I saw 16 of these eagles. But guys, go and, again, listen to the video, and I will link it here. It's important because I saw it, and it tells a story of why I was there, and that I was looking, had been doing videos about going into that area, and to Dulce, New Mexico. Many of you remember that. Then suddenly once I got into Phoenix, I would put up a video. And guys, in that video, thousands of people saw it in Phoenix at the same time I did. I'm not talking about the old, the Phoenix light. This is newer. This is in 2013. But it's incredible where I was when I saw what I did and how it went down. And I have no doubt it had nothing to do, even though it was next to Luke Air Force Base, they flew under all the incoming traffic, where there are probably 10 different large and small airports in the Phoenix area, including Luke. And these things dove under all of that traffic just as it was getting dark enough to see all the incoming planes coming from the south of the Gila River. And so this is what's going to darken the skies. This is what they don't want you to see that's coming. But always remember, the Antichrist, anti means instead of, he will have to mimic the events of Christ coming in order to deceive many. Think about what I'm saying. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.